What's up, guys and gals? Shawn, Myszka, Movement Master at OptimizeMovement.com, coming to you with another movement quick tip. Now, upon hearing that I consider myself to be a movement coach, a movement specialist, and a movement professional, and that I use movement to direct the training prescription efforts for all of my athletes, most other professionals often assume that I use the functional movement screen or other screening methodologies like it in order to direct those efforts, that I must be a strong advocate for the functional movement screen. Of course, if you know anything about my work, you will know that this isn't really the case, and I actually use the sport movement that I see in the breakdown of that as my main screening. But that doesn't mean that I think that the FMS or other tools like it is exactly useless, and it can't tell you or give you any information that would be of use to you. But as a movement professional, you just need to be very clear in regards to what it might be able to offer you, as well as what you're attempting to glean from it, what you're attempting to get from it, and then take other info from it with a grain of salt. Now, because people, get downright upset about it after seeing some of the conclusions that have been drawn in regards to the lack of application from certain studies, especially as of late, they'll see a lack of correlation between the FMS and athletic performance. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about those limitations, but after we talk about the limitations, I also want to offer you some suggestions as to how we might be able to use it and what we might be able to use it for. Okay, first off, as we talk about the limitations, let's remember that movement behavior is always going to be context dependent. So meaning, if your sport that your athlete plays is fast, chaotic, with diverse body positions and displayed characteristics from set to set or rep to rep in situations in regards to the sporting environment, we gotta know right off the bat that we would expect less of an athlete to be able to behave in sport movement like we would see in the functional movement screening. Now, of course, this is because we must remember that our expectations of all factors of the movement optimization model are going to be considerably different between those two tasks. And so when I'm talking about that, I'm talking or referring to issues or factors of kinetics, kinematics, and the kinesiological pattern. Mostly knowing that that kinesiological pattern, if that becomes more chaotic, it's going to involve more cognition, more perception, more anticipation, in a totally different style of that from the environment than what we would see in the functional movement screening. So as I noted behind me, does it increase in the ability of the functional movement screen or the competency tests that it involves? Does it increase the sport movement that we often see happening in our environments? And the answer is going to be mostly not, okay? However, that doesn't mean that it's all bad. In fact, like I mentioned a little earlier, I believe that it can be of use to us, okay? We gotta take it for what it's worth at its base level. Let's remember what the baseline test is going to be about in any of the functional movement screening methodologies, okay? It's really about the control of very general and very global movement competency levels, okay? It's an evaluation of the control of one's position in regards to those general and global movement patterns, okay? So it's only going to very rarely give us any detailed information, estimation, or indication in regards to how that athlete might behave when we see the displayed characteristics taking place in his or her sport, okay? Or the biodynamic structure of that sport. If the two don't match, we can't expect the internal actions of the athlete to interact with the environment in the same fashion. Okay? So for example, if we see knee valgus occurring during the overhead squat or the inline lunge test of the functional movement screen, we can't necessarily expect that that same thing is going to occur in the very chaotic, dynamic efforts that take place in acceleration or deceleration or change of direction in the sport movement. But what we can say, that if the athlete cannot perform in a global or general movement, like those that take place in this functional movement screening, and it's due to faulty patterns, or it might be due to a muscle or joint type issue or compensation, and we see compensation and dysfunction happening in that very base level, very general, very global movement, we may want to visit that in training so we can increase proficiency there first in that global general pattern before we would ever try to attempt to increase or improve upon that specific sport movement and the detailed displayed characteristics of that sport movement. Because we got to start general and then move to more specific and then more specialized from there. Okay? And finally, the last thing that we can get, that I feel we can get from some of the aspects of the old functional movement screening, is that if pain is present during any of those patterns, if pain is on board, we know that it's going to change movement of all different forms. So that screening can really help us get an indication in regards to where that might be stemming from if we can isolate a particular pain issue on a particular pattern or multiple patterns and see where that might be limiting us in regards to posture, balance, stability, and flexibility in sport movement. So I don't use the functional movement screen or tools like it as my do-all end-all. But I will sometimes use it at a very base level when I'm starting with an athlete to get better ideas in regards to how they behave more simply as a human being than they do as an athlete out in the field, court, track, etc. So don't throw it out the window and not use it, but just remember what you're using it for. So for this Movement Quick Tip, this has been Shawn Myszka at OptimizeMovement.com. Till next time, Movement Masters, let's go out and get it, and let's all continue to master the art of optimizing movement.